So, the European Fan Festival for Final Fantasy XIV took place in Berlin fairly recently. I was there, and it was absolutely amazing. But upon coming out of the press conference, I've been left with a couple of questions on my mind over anything else. One of the most important being, how do the new jobs work, and what is the unannounced one? What was showcased to us, and how does it break down? Was that obvious moment in the trailer indicative of what we can expect from a second new Evercold job, or was it a red herring? We'll talk about everything here. So firstly, I'll be discussing the newly announced tank, Bastion, and then looking at our as of yet unannounced Physical Ranged DPS, and what the leading predictions are, as well as my own. As a quick aside, if you want to support deep dives and discussions into FF14, please do consider subscribing to the channel, because it really does help me. So Bastion comes first. This is the main tank being added in Evercold and will accompany Paladin in the slot. As a quick reminder, Dark Knight, Gunbreaker and Warrior will be off tanks, with special proficiencies in providing party support, which I assume will be mostly defensive, and Paladin with the newcomer Bastion will be main tanks, specialising in directly mitigating incoming enemy damage. This means that when I'm watching through the trailer they gave for the job, I'm always looking for abilities that might be a one-to-one link to something Paladin possesses, versus actions that seem exclusive to Bastion. Bastion comes equipped with dual shields as their weapon, and they are called Skiltborg, and they flip around on the arms to swap between a clawed melee mode and ranged giant triple-barreled cannons. It starts in Limsa Laminta at level 90, and it will be exclusively available in evolved mode, so it will only have consolidated action counts, and as a result the animations we're seeing could well be a decent chunk of what the job actually possesses as a whole. And that secondly, we are looking directly for buttons that could have hidden more complex effects, or that will change situationally based on the case in which you use it. Just like how Paladin has the capability to have Gap Closer and Cover on the same button in its evolved mode with Evercold. They gave a tiny bit of lore information on the background of the job, confirming first of all that it doesn't come from the Fourth but instead from the Source, and that its combat style originates in the vast expanse of the Northern Empty. There, the region of Airslent, which I hope I didn't mispronounce, has long been protected by these Bastions, who have been studying their weapons for generations. They are warriors, through and through. Now what I'm going to do really quickly is play through the trailer a couple of times whilst I talk, and point out the bits and pieces that came across as extremely interesting to me. Nothing is confirmed as of yet, and really we need to wait until we see the job gauge as well as in-game footage with the UI turned on to draw any properly meaningful conclusions on how parts of its kit interact with one another or what their actual effects are, but there most certainly is enough here to talk about at least. So, they show right at the start that this job can switch between melee and ranged abilities. You might argue that they are stances, but my expectation is simply that basic attacks or other actions build gauge, or that they passively generate gauge over time and ranged attacks spend gauge. This is just like Evercold Paladin in that regard. This first main action, which makes the gun shields glow, could be a couple of things. Firstly, a simple tank stance button, but I also have something related to this that I'd like to bring across from the press conference question and answer session that Naoki Yoshida had later on the day at FanFest. Let me quote it for you. Regarding the ranged attacks in its toolkit, I think you could also look to Paladin, which also has ranged attacks. But I think one of the benefits of Bastion is that it can shoot. It has a good combination of close range attacks and then attacks which can be done from afar, so with those shooting abilities it can be useful in certain encounter situations. I did mention in the keynote presentation as well that one of the key appeal points about Bastion is that in its toolkit it does have a good recovery and guarding abilities as well. As a main tank, you can instantly apply those effects to a party member, but the key thing about Bastion is you can also do it at a timing of your liking. So you can look to what the boss is going to do, and based on the boss's timeline, you can decide when would be the most optimal time to apply that recovery or guarding ability for your party members. I think that's the key point. Of course, there is a good range of attacking skills as well in the toolkit, but this is another aspect of the job that you can take into account. So, he mentions explicitly that Paladin can have ranged attacks, but then specifically distinguishes it by mentioning that Bastion has the key benefit in being able to shoot, as well as that it offers a combination of melee and ranged attacks that give it versatility in combat scenarios. So whilst I think some of the attacks, namely the glowing empowered ranged ability showcased, are likely directly comparable to Paladin's magic ranged combo, there's also this claw action right at the start that happens after the glowing stance action, and I wonder if that too is a ranged attack that transitions you into a buffed melee phase as well. Also of note is the fact that the gap closer ability showcased here seems to do damage to the enemy. This means that it is either distinct from the utility gap closer they may also possess, and instead could be more akin to the one that Summoner has in their Ifrit cycle, or it means that some jobs will still have gap closers that deal damage. This could be an opportunity for Bastion to differentiate itself a little even. You know how Paladin can now cover on their gap closer? What if Bastion can leap to an enemy to deal damage, or leap to an ally to mitigate damage? Something akin to this would be quite interesting, I feel. But the most intriguing part of this entire info dump from Naoki Yoshida comes at the tail end. It does have a good recovery and guarding abilities as well. As a main tank, you can instantly apply those effects to a party member, but the key thing about Bastion is that you can also do it at a timing of your liking. So, you can look to what the boss is going to do, and based on the boss's timeline, you can decide when would be the most optimal time to apply that recovery or guarding ability for your party members. This bit here, which I just read again. This could sound like it's adjacent to some limited time Cardia style mitigative ability for party members if you read it in a certain way. But this could also mean that simply Bastion has more free-flowing access to its party mitigation than its peers, and that you can delay the usages of some of those actions via charges. It could even mean that Bastion can give its cooldowns to allies whenever it wants, even partway through usage. On that note, I think we're going to have to wait and see. Speaking of charges, look at this slashing attack with the claw versions of the Bastion weapons. Doesn't this look like it repeats and that it's extremely fast? Considering that so many jobs in Evercold have their own version of a hypercharge, I do wonder if this is Bastion's. It could be spammed like Machinist's hypercharge, or held down like Flamethrower, may be gaining potency the longer you hold it. They also showed off the shift in stance between claw mode and gun mode, as well as what seems to be the empowered ranged combo coming from it, that I think looks genuinely very cool. I'm excited to get to grips with the job to properly understand how it all plays out in practice, and just how different it ends up being from its main tank brother in role. They show a defensive skill, which could well be the unique 40% mitigation for Bastion, as well as this weird one where the tank blasts underneath the ground, and the shells burrow towards the enemy. I have no idea what effect this could have, but I hope it's more than just flat damage with no additional thought. It also has this finishing attack, which looks to me like very much it's taking either a cast bar and resembling Numeralot, or is instead possibly a PvP style channel, and you'll be able to move around slowly during it. I know I keep bringing up those PvP style channels in like every video talking about Evercold, but that's just because I desperately want to see them make their way into PvP, and if we see it ever, now is the time. I wonder what its abbreviation will be, even. It can't be BTN because that's taken by the greatest Reaper Eorzea has ever seen. It can't be BST. Could it simply be BAS instead, like Warrior is WAR? I wonder. This job is a lovely addition to the tank arsenal, I think, and thematically makes a great, distinct tank that feels, honestly, very reminiscent of that high-tech weapon feeling that Sage added to the healer role. But really, I need to see more to understand its playstyle beyond legally distinct Paladin, and I want to hear more to understand what makes it truly unique. I do think it's a little bit of a shame that EU FanFest didn't include much in the way of evolved mode sneak peeks, because I really desperately want to see more. Now, let's move on to discussing the Physical Ranged DPS option, which is, as of yet, unannounced. So you might be thinking, but what on earth is there to even talk about? Well, interestingly, there's a lot of speculation thanks to a handful of rather strong hints and lore drops throughout FanFest itself. Firstly comes from Naoki Yoshida's t-shirt all the way back in North America. Now, he didn't wear a new hint t-shirt this time around because he was cosplaying as a Bastion, and that is a habit which has been observed in the past as well, and that it can often mean that the hint for both upcoming jobs were actually on the same initial t-shirt. In this case, that one of Ratartin with the text "Guess Who's Back." Now we know that Bastion was the hint from the imagery, and it was quite an obvious hint as well, but could the quote also offer a second hint? That's where my mind is going, and I'm sure the minds of many others are as well. The immediate prediction from Guess Who's Back, that I'm sure many share, is that it could well be a boomerang-based job. But if I'm to be completely honest, I don't really buy this idea, nor do I particularly like it. First of all, the dancer already exists in the game, and it uses dual chakrams, which it throws towards the enemies, and then in short order they return to sender. In terms of function, they are very similar to boomerangs, and as a result, if the new Physical Ranged used it, they wouldn't have that really strong, unique core job aesthetic that sets it apart within the role. You'd have gun, bow, chakrams, and single kinda chakram, but kind of not, but it looks similar anyway. It'd be a bit disappointing, honestly. That alone is reason enough for me to doubt Boomerang, because I think it would work better as just a skin for Dancer. Though FanFest gave us cause to launch our suspicions in a different direction entirely. So firstly, as soon as the updated Evercold trailer played, people were completely expecting to see that new tank job, and they did, except earlier on in the trailer there was a different scene entirely that seemed oddly representative of a new job. This Mikote girl here, who seems to be called Visna, is certainly suspect. As a little aside, I think it's fairly heavily hinted that she is the old lady telling the story to the child at other points in the trailer. They're both Mikote, and it lines up concerningly well, and it's likely that she'll be a new addition to the main party during Evercold in order to make her intimate knowledge of the Warrior of Light's adventures thematically correct. But in the trailer itself, she's seen here wielding what appears to be a short magical staff. This falcon-looking bird flies up to her, surprising her, and some sort of contact between the two makes a magical glyph summon from her staff, clearly imbuing the element of water. The bird flies away, and the scene changes. Later in the day, there is a development panel containing a lot of discussion about FF14's sound design, and amongst others, Soken is taking part as one of the main guests. He decides to show off a couple of sound effects, they play out, and then the team does an entire bit about how he has accidentally leaked some of the sound effects for the unannounced job coming in Evercold. Now, first of all, this is very clearly a planned bit rather than an accidental leak, but it's still quite entertaining. Secondly, the sounds are incredibly indicative.
Yeah. じゃあ1個目の交換音どうぞ。
Okay, play the first sound.
Anyone know
that one?
すげえな、誰もいないね。
Doesn't look like anyone knows that one.
OK。じゃあもう1個行ってみよう。もう1個の方どうぞ。
The second one.
誰かいる？
Anyone?
いるわけないんだよね。
No, I don't think there is.
ソゲンさん、まずいですよ。この音、次の日本ファンフェスで紹介する予定の新ジョブ DPS の SE ですから。
No, wait, Soken. What are you doing? These are sound effects from the new DPS job we're going to announce at the JP Fan Fest.
絶対ダメ。
That's absolute no-go.
ダメだ。No.
The first screams insert magical effect here with maybe an explosion at the end to me, implying the job has at least some kind of magical component, but the second is even clearer. A bird screeching, followed by what seems to be the slashing of talons in some kind of claw attack. And sometimes, when you add 1 + 1, you really do just get 2. I think with both of these clear hints combined, at the very least we can confirm that this Falcon is part of the new Phys Ranged job kit. It could be that they are specifically a bird tamer and that they will use it to execute attacks, or there's also the lower possibility that they can wield multiple familiar animals, though I worry that if this is the case it might come close to treading on the shoes of Summoner. This is a job exclusive to FF14 as well, so I think it can't be too similar to the trainer dress sphere that exists in Final Fantasy X-2. But it's actually the girl and the staff that I believe could well be a red herring. It's totally possible that she is the job NPC or party representative of this new bird-wielding job. Yes, but I have a strange feeling she might not be, and that when we get that third trailer, the camera will instead pan away as the bird flies to its master, who could very well be an Erenville or even an Alice, or somebody else that we already know very well who has picked up this new job for 8.0. Related to this, let me go down a little rabbit hole for a moment. This might sound silly, but if it bears fruit, that would be cool, right? Now let's carry on the copium thread of Alice taking on this new job. Far earlier in FF14, Alice summons a Porksy, right? One which she names Angelo. There is another character named Angelo, the dog that accompanies Rinoa in Final Fantasy VIII, which aids her in battle. Rinoa uses arm-mounted projectile weapons which you could liken either to little boomerangs or even crossbows. Perfect weapons for a physical range DPS, and unique from the other jobs in the role. Considering that Rinoa never fulfilled the archetype of any real concrete job in Final Fantasy history, and was instead kind of her own thing, I don't see it being as outside of the realm of possibility that they pull from those thematic threads of her capabilities and create something new based on them. A homage that can stand strongly on its own merit and would get fans really excited. It also makes further sense that a bird will be included because of Evercold's ties to Norse mythology, in which birds are very prevalent. It also links up nicely with the Guess Who's Back, as a bonded and tamed bird would obviously return to sender after executing their attacks. The new job could use various elemental bolts or projectile weapons from their arm-mounted projectile launcher, whether it's a full-on crossbow or anything else, and greater attacks as well as movement skills would revolve around launching attacks with the bird familiar, or using it in tandem with the wielder's own abilities to create powerful combos. The elemental shots could be what caused that elemental glyph to spawn in the trailer even. If we go back and listen to those sound effects again with this in mind, for me at least, it feels like they fit perfectly, one for one. We already have something a tiny bit like this in the game right now even. Ranger in Occult Crescent. And I wouldn't put it past Square Enix to use that as a testing bed for some animations that may find their way into the fully fledged 8.0 version of the job. So, that's my prediction. The new Physical Ranged DPS will use an armor-mounted projectile, likely a crossbow, but possibly something else or a mixture of things, as well as a pet falcon. Maybe their second hand will have a falconry glove even, I don't know. And if that's correct, it would be a lovely little narrative knot to tie up by having Alice being the job representative from the party, with our new Mikoto character instead being a red herring in the trailer. I think overall, I'm just really excited to see more of these jobs. I'm not really the type of person who is overly excited by flashy CGI trailers or animations, and whilst what we've seen looks very good and extremely interesting, I know that for me and many others, what we're really waiting for is the job action trailer and whatever media tour or showcase they decide to give, so that we can get down to the nitty-gritty and truly understand just how much the landscape of FF14 will change thanks to evolved mode and these new additions. For now, I'm joining you in the boat of waiting and seeing.